Season 6, Episode 21, number 239 of the podcast. I'm surprised we even got in today.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Lots of
starting
lots of
later.
snow. Lots of snow.
Lots of snow,
Lots
yeah.
of snow. Lots of a little bit of freezing rain. But we were in our 4-wheel drives and made it to the on ramp.
And both you and I don't mind the shitty drive. We're
No.
okay with it.
We like it.
We do like it.
Yeah.
If I had a lot of money that I could just spend on what I wanted, I would get a sweet SUV with the big tires and just go. Like, I want a vehicle
had
that
$1 million.
Well, actually, $1 million isn't really a lot anymore, is it?
It's not. I saw something this morning, an article that says in order to retire comfortably, you need 1.7.
Gotcha.
1.7.
Wow.
So you get that by selling your house and selling your car and selling all the extra equipment you've accumulated over life, Kijiji, all that shit, and then you can retire with an empty apartment.
Yeah.
No vehicle.
No vehicle.
But if you had the money, that's where you started. If you had the money.
If I had the money, I'd love to have this big vehicle that I could just drive anywhere, anytime. That is appealing to me. I know that the law might not like that because to me, if I'm driving on a country road and I go off-road because of the weather conditions, but my vehicle can remain moving and safe, and I don't damage like a people's friends or an animal or whatever, I'm good. I don't want to run into a cow or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say no animals were damaged in the pursuit of this dream.
Basically, what I want is Batman's car. I want the Batmobile, but the Dark Knight version.
The Urban Dad version of it.
No, what's the guy's name? Nolan? The guy
Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan's videos, his Batmobile. I want one of those.
Yeah, that's the Dark Knight. That was his trilogy. Yeah,
I love it, bro. That vehicle is something else. But anyway, if I had $1 million, but $1 million probably isn't enough. So
yeah,
if I had $1.7 million, they're gonna have to change the song.
Yeah, I don't think the 1.7 like that. They just said retire comfortably, but it wasn't specific on the criteria. So, what does that mean? Like, I'm not quite sure. I know what retiring comfortably means specifically. Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what that means, but I hear you. And back to the on-ramp thing. That was a good one. There was a lot of little bits that we kind of were playing around with, talking about the diffusion of leadership.
Diffusion of leadership, diffusion of responsibility.
See, what's interesting is that diffusion of responsibility I've heard before. Like, I have heard that. And it was almost like somehow it was made to seem as if, shrew, the leaders sort of thought to themselves, as long as we're only talking about responsibility, they're not going to look at us as actually diffusing our leadership or, abdicating our leadership, so to speak. But I put forward this idea, and it was based on a couple polo conversations you and I had, that whole idea of the frustration of being in a room and it feels like no one actually being in a room with a bunch of leaders and no one's actually taking the lead. So being a leader amongst leaders, and if the only way that leadership is framed is through the royal we, then it's really difficult to figure out who's supposed to take care of, what job, what work, what task. And I've had moments where I'm nostalgic about when I was still working restaurants, and my boss would tell me directly, each of the managers at the table. So there was one for the bar, there was me. I actually had 2 roles, and then it was divided. So we had the kitchen manager, me as kind of like, I guess, the chef, and then we had the bar lead. And then at one point I had all the kitchen stuff, so that, kitchen supervisor was no longer part of our leadership, the owner, who is a working owner, would say to me, Clough, this week you must, and he gave me a list. And that was on top of the me sitting there thinking about rib steak. And I'm saying to myself, Clough, this week you must, create a special, or I have to move more romaine because it's in the fridge. He wasn't ever telling me that I had to move more romaine.
Right.
That was my job. The stuff that I had direct eyes on, that was my job to come up with it. If he was telling me I had to move more romaine, then I wasn't doing my job. It was that clear. And I've found myself sitting in meetings recently, staff meetings, and you know, often a complaint from teachers is that sense that you're being micromanaged. And sometimes it's purposeful because you're not managing yourself. So there has to be some sort of, commentary like whatever, get your marks in faster, or are you assessing properly? Like these are the things where you can feel like you're micromanaged because it's no longer you sitting there, what am I going to do with rib steak this week? Or how am I going to sell more romaine? It's actually somebody noticing. And I've always tried to not give anybody anything to notice. So they would actually more so ask questions about tell me about how you design your, so it's not about moving the rib steak. A better question for me at the time was like, tell me some of your ideas about creative ways to use rib steak. And I know for sure it's not based on the fact that I have a ton of rib steak in the fridge. It's actually because they noticed that I've done good specials with rib steak. See, it's kind of different, right? So your boss, how your boss notices the work that you do. But I've been in EDU meetings for the last 17 years where it really isn't clear as to whose responsibility is what when you walk away, because 90% of what is framed is here's what we need to do. And there's been times where, I've kind of waited to see who's all in the we, who's the person that's actually directly doing something, either scheduling or creating or chasing. It's another little bit of philosophy that I've really taken into, you and I have talked about this whole idea of friend to all is friend to none. And I have taken in this royal we to kind of embrace that as well. And I no longer have this phrase in my head that when I think of somebody that I want to get to know more, I no longer say, I wish we were better friends. I flip to, this is what I'm going to do to act and demonstrate that I'm pursuing a friendship. A lot more work because when it's only on you to sort of start that ball rolling to actually get some data to figure out, am I on the right track? That can be an uphill push, right? Because you're trying to get, like, when you're trying to, build collaboration or building capacity. If I flip back to EDU language, that can often be a long path to building those relationships. But stripping it of the we and this abstract expectation that everybody's kind of working together, but nobody's really working on anything, kind of a thing. That's become a bit of a red herring to me of whether or not work culture, one element of work culture, whether it's healthy or not healthy, is do people actually know what they should be working on? And we have the exact same expectations of our classes, right? And I can remember, part of my TPA process, administrators coming in and asking students directly, what are you doing? What are you learning? How is it connected? That's the trifecta, right?
Hmm.
And kind of rambly, but this is about the royal we. I still want to touch base just on new teachers after this and how they figure out what it means to kind of to do the expectations of what a good job is, and then what's actually on paper as far as what a good job is. I guess there's a third space too, how they feel about their job, which can be another element altogether.
So the royal we, um, when I hear it, right away I start to filter what is my role based on, like, when I hear we are going to do this to assist you, always find it interesting that somebody's speaking for other people, because usually in my line of work there's like four or five it's collaborative, right? But just because it's collaborative doesn't mean that, well, by nature it means everybody's doing something, everybody's bringing something to the table. But that's not what it translates to. It's not what it translates to at all. And I know this week, I guess I was fighting back on the royal we, because the royal we was landing on me. And I'm like, you can't use the word we if it's all me. And it's not going to be all me, because that's not what my job is. I think sometimes people get really upset when other people define their role and make it very clear what their role is, because their role may not include what other people would like them to be doing. And this is the danger of not having a boss, or, sorry, an accessible boss, and a boss that cares about talking to you about your job and about what you do and how you're doing it. They don't want to hear about it unless there's a problem. So what you do is you try to avoid problems, and you try to keep things moving in the right direction, so that no news is good news. I hate that saying. No news is good news, because that means that you don't want to hear about what's happening, and that when you do, it means it's bad, but you never focus on the good.
I mean, you and I, we know enough about, kind of digging into the stoic mindset that no news just means no news. That's all it is. And to sort of decide that that's good or bad is preemptive.
And you don't have to have an opinion,
That
right? Like,
too.
you don't have to have an opinion. Many people choose to, though, which is their choice.
Mhm.
I Yeah, I don't know how deep I want to dig this week on this podcast, but
It's okay.
I was I was telling you before we started that this week seems like it has been a draining week for me emotionally,
Mhm.
but it's weird to me at the moment, because the things that have happened this week, I've had things happen in other weeks that I would assume would have taken more out of me emotionally than this week. It's really kind of interesting to just step back and observe, and kind of that's what I'm doing this weekend. I'm like observing my thoughts, my feelings, situations, why I may be responding a certain way, but I do want to land. No, I don't even want to land. Tell us about your Tell us what you want to talk about with respect to new teachers or newer teachers.
Had a really cool, so this semester we've had some new staff jumping in. New staff not only to our school, but new staff flipping from LTO to contract. So there's a newness, right? There's a freshness, there's a perspective change, there's a holy crap, I've here I am, I've arrived, right? Because there is, for some individuals, there's this um a noticeable transition kind of glow about them. And that glow can be really nice for some, and for others it can be a little bit stressful, depending on how they're navigating their courses, their classes. And it's such a quick turnaround too, because sometimes that decision is made just a couple days before the semester turnaround. Because if you are let's say, use an example, you probably know this, and anyone that's edu and listening to us knows this, like if you're LTO for a semester, you're wrapping up your semester, and then doing exams or doing culminating, talking about secondary here, and then you get 1 or 2 days that are kind of like PD days, down days before the next semester starts. So if you're just wrapping up your LTO and then you find out you got your contract, you have to stay at that LTO and then you got 2 days to jump to your new school. Like there's no you if you're fresh in your curriculum and fresh in your teaching, that's a fast turnaround, right? That can almost feel like you're whatever the first time you taught when you got out of faculty. Like it's that fresh. You're starting fresh. So I like being in spec ed because, well, for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I really like it is that because spec ed has, like, we've got roots into all departments, right? Because I don't speak curriculum, it's strategy and it's kind of mostly strategy and technique assessment to strategy technique assessment that I can have really great conversations with new teachers, old teachers that are not bound to overall expectations. And talking to new teachers to the school, what's kind of cool is I'm still pretty fresh there too. I'm only in my third year. So I'm aware of what this transition can feel like. I'm aware of still the relationships that feel new. I'm aware of where are the resources? Like, how do I get this thing done? I'm aware of, don't use the photocopier in the mailroom unless you really have to. Use the photocopier in the library, but make sure you're there before 8:15. So there's the extra little the nuanced pieces that I pay attention to. So at our last, we had a staff meeting at the tail end. I got a chance to meet a couple of our new teachers and have some really great conversations and listen to what their transition story is, which was fascinating. Um, it also led me to think about, again, individuals that, so you get into your contract, you're a part of NTIP, but I guess part of it is I was doing a little bit of NTIP sort of stuff. All that stuff that I mentioned before about the things that I figured out about the school. But it was also just talking to them about the kids that I know that are exceptional that are on their rosters, helping them understand what their class composition could look like. I even went up and I sat with someone in their classroom and they were talking about, I've told you about how I do that kind of that vision. I do a vision day whenever I'm given a new room. I'll just kind of sit there in the middle of the room and I'll even take some photos and I'll kind of do like a dream board, like what can I do in this space? What could I add? And I try and do at least that 360 on a flat plane. Like, how am I going to grow pedagogy here? And kids learning, how can I do it? So I got to kind of sit up in someone's class and hear them talk, maybe not as as tactical as I do based on my experience, but to listen to them talk about how they move about around the room. What is it they're hoping to do? This is going to be this area that I'm going to try and do this thing in. And it was really cool to hear. I've never actually got to sit in on somebody else's thinking. And that was really wonderful. I want to have this vertical learning space here, but I want to have it different on this side to differentiate for this. And that was really cool. So I had this dual moment of being able to pride it. Others have said it better about where the mentor is actually being a mentored, right? Where you actually think about, there's reciprocity to mentorship. Mentorship is the verb between two people sharing growth strategies, sharing resources, sharing a conversation, and no single person necessarily is ahead of the other. They're just kind of sitting in different places. So that's how I really felt. I felt like I had a really cool active mentorship moment where I was able to contribute and able to receive. And that hasn't happened in a little while. And I really loved, I've mentioned it before, like I love the book, The Third Teacher. It's one of my favorite EDU books of all time. And going back into that one, it just makes me happy. Even if I don't need to, I see it on my shelf and the orangey red spine on it, and I'll go and grab it and just open it up and read one of those stories in there about design. So I love to hear. I felt like I was I was seeing the seeds for this person. And so now I'm going to check in over the semester and like see, are they able to action these things? What are some of the struggles? That's the first broader part. The second part that happened was one of the individuals shared a story about a situation from our previous school, and they wanted my opinion on it. And it was one of those, they didn't get in trouble at the previous school. It wasn't that, but they're walk me through your process was scrutinized. Um, so it was classroom teacher, and it had to do with flat out. It had to do with permitting walks. So when a student said, I need to take a walk," and complications arose from that. And then so this teacher laid out this whole kind of like scenario, and they're like, "Okay, so how would you have navigated this? Like, what would you have done differently?" And I kind of went back to their very almost second, first or second sentence, and I said, "I would have that's the game changer right there. That point right there, I wouldn't have done that." I said, "That's in my assessment, that was the mistake. Everything you did after that was correct, but probably better to say it was corrective, as in you were always chasing, trying to fix what that decision was." And they looked at me, they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "I would have never have done that." And they said, "Well, what would you have done differently had you done that?" And then I kind of went through and said, "Okay, when you did this, I would have done it that way." So it was just kind of like shaping some of their decisions along the way. But it was really cool. I love the fact that this teacher is they're still teaching. I like that they're still good to go. I like it that they have a case study now for them to think about their decision making. I actually advised them. I said, "You should write that down." They're like, "Why?" I said, "Because I think if you wrote it down, and then highlight it at each of the points where you don't know what resource you need, then you learn this school and figure out who's the person or the resource that you need if this thing happens again." I said, "It's a beautiful way for you to case study your own practice. Often we're having to look at other people's, experiences. Use your own." I said, "There's enough here." And I said, "This situation will come up again. It's easy because this situation is something that I encounter all the time." But yeah, that was really cool. It was a really fascinating and fun moment to meet a fairly new teacher. For me, meeting a new teacher is anyone that's like under 5 years teaching. I'll kind of kind of put them in the new teacher zone. Um, in one particular case, it was a brand new contract too. So very cool.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, man.
I I find that um I'm entering into a space where I'm meeting new teachers. So if we were to define that in their first 5 years, that are either really open to the kind of work I'm doing or really closed.
Mm,
It's very interesting, eh? And the first thing I think of is control. People trying to establish what they can control and what they can't control. I do want to I want to jump into the re-engagement pool for a second and talk about the idea that some schools and their culture are not open to the work that I'm doing.
hmm
And I find that it is very interesting. And you would think, no, you wouldn't think. Some people might think that, some people might think it's just as simple as, well, they requested your service, therefore they're all in. And I'm like, no, they request a service because they don't know what else to do, to try to make it appear as though they're doing the right thing, which is
hmm
trying to bring the kid back. But they don't really want the kid back. And they would all take
We've
offense
talked about
to
that
that.
before. We've talked. You and I have landed base on this one before. Like,
On the podcast or
yeah,
just
we
in general?
have
Oh, okay.
not where you're going right now, but we have talked about whether or not your student success strategies clearly indicate that you want the kid in your school and that you're not doing it just to sort of do the checklist, and the complexity of that people are on board across the board in some way demonstrating that they want children in the school, maybe more specifically specific children in the school. So yeah.
It does get messy. But
Mhm,
I guess my whole it's funny when I think of my work, I visualize myself sitting in mud and just playing. And sometimes I'm really happy in the mud, splashing the mud and getting dirty. But then there's other times where I'm sitting in the mud and it's kind of dried in my beard. And it's like, oh, it's all crinkly now and it won't come out right. And it's irritating me. But it's funny. I wake up and get ready to be in the mud for the day, whereas other other people get up and they try to avoid mud. It's like I just have this visualization of me sitting in mud and playing in it. And it is interesting. So I do want to make a distinction. There have been there have been cases where the school is the school asks for the support and they totally want the student welcome back. And I can see it. I can see it in how the classroom teacher talks about it. I can see it in how the principal deals with it. I see it and feel it. And then the kid comes back, but the kid causes major chaos and trauma, um, because schools operate a certain way. And there needs to be some buy-in from kids to there needs to be some compliance. And I say that in a respectful way. There needs to be some compliance. You can't just go somewhere and completely ignore the culture and do everything opposite of what's being done. So school's open to everything. Kid comes back, kid causes chaos. School still wants them, but needs to, and I'm on board with this too, needs to there needs to be parameter. There needs to be more. You need to tighten things up. And I remember saying to one of my students, I'm like, listen, this school, I'm like, I don't think you get it. And that's okay because I don't think you're in a place to see what we see because of your trauma and your lived experience and what's currently happening. We get all that. But at the same time, this isn't going to work. Like, you can't come here and it can't be a free for all every day when you're here. We offered you that playground and now we see you're destroying everything in your path. Can't have that. Can't have that for other kids. They can't have a day of destruction every time you come. So there needs to be parameters around you. Kid pushes back. I'm very clear. Okay, I get it. I get you feel like everybody's um, we're suffocating you. That's how you feel. But that's really not what we're doing. We're ensuring that it's a safe place for everybody, including you. And they truly want you here. I get the vibe. Trust me, I don't tell when I get the vibe they don't want them there. I don't tell the kid that. I don't say they don't want you here. But when they do want them there, I tell them, hey, listen, they want you here. Like, they've given me carte blanche. They want to collaborate. They want it all, and they're open. This kid just wouldn't, couldn't, can't at the moment. And I remember saying to the principal, I'm like, this kid needs a little bit of space. And I know that sounds weird because they're supposed to be here every day, but their parents know that they're at home. I know they're at home. Everybody knows they're safe. Maybe we just let them have a little bit of that time because we can bring them in, but when we do, it's mass chaos for everybody, and you just don't have the resources to make it work. And if we're talking I can't be there every day all the time because I have other kids on my caseload. And this goes to, if I can just bump over to this business of my schedule and how many kids I have on my roster. Some people want me to have 30 kids on my roster. If you want me to have 30 kids on my roster, I can't come and sit with a kid for a half day and hold their hand. I can't get through all my kids in a week that way. It's not going to happen. So I can get to kids, but it needs to be a half an hour, 40-minute check-in, go to the next. It's check-ins. It's not dealing with the real issues, right? Well, now there's more kids on my roster, so I can't just run from one place to another like I can with less kids. And it's a conversation that comes up all the time because some people are very focused on, what do you mean you're only working with this many kids? But then the people that see what I'm doing are like, thank God he only has this many kids because he can barely do this good service with this many kids. So some places Some places don't want the kid. And I was telling you in the on-ramp that it can really mess me up here. Now, I'm building in strategies and doing things that it doesn't mess me up there. I just look at the facts and operate. But it is insanity, right? The definition of insanity is when you do the same thing over and over again, you expect something to change. You're doing the same thing over and over again and you expect a different outcome. It's not happening. This is one of the hardest things about my work is that they call me, they say, we would really like your help. And then when I respond, say, awesome, this is what the kid's doing, saying, acting. What can we do here to like open this up? And the response is nothing. We're not changing. The kid needs to come back and fit here. We need the kid every day in math class, English class, science class. I'm like, then the kid's not coming. Why? Because it doesn't work for the kid. We'll make it work. That's not what I'm here to do. And then everybody looks at each other like, well, who's going to make this work? And then I landed with saying to you, I must act. There needs to be action from me. So what's the action? Oh, I will continue to speak to the student. I will continue to encourage the student to come. I will continue to provide you with what the student's telling me so that maybe we can mold some of that here. This is what I'm going to continue to do because I need to act. What action are you going to take? Sometimes I say that to people and they're like, I don't know. Nothing. Okay. At least I know. And maybe that's why I'm feeling so low right now because I need to learn. I need to learn to not fight back expecting change. What I need to do is to continue to act and continue to do my part and try not to get too high because when I go high and I look down and I see everything, it's hard to swallow. When I did my kryptonite is when the moment I discover that the school that's called me to help doesn't want the kid in the building. Nobody's going to stand and say, I don't want him back. They do it with their actions. They do it by not shifting anything for someone who doesn't fit at the moment. They won't differentiate, if you will. That's hard.
Yeah, the that whole opportunity to see somebody else's supportive checklist can be sometimes disheartening. Um, I've told you a few times, like I've been in that moment um, where I'm a provider of student success tools, but I'm also a gatekeeper. I've been in that position as in I do have a tool that I have to use. I am aware that there's an application process for someone to be able to access my tools. And I'm also the person that's assessing somebody else's efforts. And that's a tricky spot to be in, right? Because, you know, there were times where I thought I absolutely can help like reconnect this kid with an a classroom learning experience. I can be that. But then I'm looking at the list and I'm like the checklist and the referring individual hasn't done any of the work. They're sort of jumping the queue. And I've sometimes felt caught in this space of believing the magic. Like I should just take the kid on. Like I'll take it on. Fine. I'll do it. I'll do it. Or I'm a part of the conversation with whoever's my leadership saying, yeah, that's fine. I can do it. I can do it. And I think that I've grown less comfortable with that way of thinking because it suggests that I started to really get bothered with this idea that our system is dependent on magic and dependent on magical individuals. Like give them the chids. Give them the chids. I don't know what it is, but chid just has a way. Let chids take care of it. I've been on the receiving end of that type of characterization in the past too. And I would say it's mischaracterization because even though what it maybe looks like, maybe some of the things I do might seem kind of magical, I'm actually pretty tactical and I have a deep understanding of the system. So when I do make a move, sure, maybe I've got some character trait that makes me funny or silly or non-threatening, maybe. So there's a little bit of the magic. But underneath that, I have all the tactical skills of understanding who's got the resources, who do I have to have on speed dial, what relationships do I have to maintain so that I have the best possible toolkit when I'm in this sort of like similar, not same position as you. But I grew very tired of being the person being the gatekeeper and the person in the trenches doing the work. I remember, and I draw back to hospitality. Part of the part of the challenge in two of the places that I worked at was I was the only one, and that's just the nature of, let's say, being a manager or a supervisor. I was the only one that was rewriting recipe books, doing the ordering, and being in the kitchen. Like that's very tiring. And I know a lot of small business owners, that is the model. You're designing your business, you're making sure the business delivers, like in a managerial kind of position, and you're actually doing the labor. I get it. That's the small business trifecta. You make sure that you're cracking off on all of those. But because I'm not in a small business and there's other people that should be taking care of stuff, that's where I got frustrated on a few occasions where I was the one that had to play all those roles because I thought to myself, I'm not supposed to be playing all these roles. And the fact that I'm being expected to means that the system is actually not monitoring itself well. Somebody else needs to sort of be able to make a better decision in this moment to see whether or not this choice is a good choice, and it shouldn't just be left to me.
There are all kinds of things that come with the system. Um, Speaking of systems, Rochelle posted, "RC, you are illustrating the need for systems thinking." I would really, if you can, Rochelle, I'd like you to. Can you add a little bit more there? Because I'm not getting it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what's interesting is when people tell me, so okay, when people like I've been in situations where I've told people you need to ease up. What you're expecting is too much right now. You need to back off. And then I've also told people, um, you're way too open and way too loose. You need to tighten up. So
Mhm.
some people like Chidiak, his head's in the clouds. He wants all these cloudy things. I'm like, no, just look over here and they'll tell you I'm not in the clouds, I'm in the mud and I want to shut things down. And it's like, what does the kid need? This is the other thing too that is killing me. My job, it says right in my description that my work is student centered. And yet when I bring up student centered, I'm told to be quiet because it won't work. The system can't do what it is that the kid needs. And then some people talk about the student all the time. Like, so I try to be reasonable because I know schools can't do it all. A couple times I've suggested to schools, what can we do this? And they're like, no, we don't have the human resources for that. I'm like, okay, fair enough, but like, where do we land? And I know where they want to land. They're like, well, can't you just come and do it for us every day, all the time? And I'm like, no, I can't. So we have to have a we have to have a way of operating that well, if they need me there every day, that's not good. Because I can't do that. And I've never promised that for anybody. It's funny, one family that when they learned in a meeting that I would go to the house and I would ring the doorbell and I would say to the kid, "Let's go to school. I'll walk with you." The look on their face was incredible. They're like, "You're going to do that?" I'm like, "Yup, I'm going to do that." I say I'm going to do that because I'm going to do that. And when other people say, "No, Roland will do this," I'm like, "Whoa, don't do that. Don't tell them I'm going to do things that I can't do." So this one family that I said, "I'll come to your house and I will walk the kid to school." They've moved. Now they live where the kid can't walk to school. It's too far. And I said to some people, I said, "Look, my that strategy's now gone." They're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "It's not. I can't. It's not in my toolbox anymore. I can't walk them to school." So I'm like, they're gonna lean on that. The kid knows that I can't walk them to school. It's too far. I can certainly show up at the door, ring the doorbell, be like, "Hey, it's me again." But they know that that's where it stops. It starts and stops right there. Chidiac's at the door. He's putting the heat on me, but we're not walking anywhere. Don't tell people things, and don't, well, here, I can't say don't. People can do whatever they want. I'm going to choose to do what I need to do. So if you're promising people stuff, and there are people who promise people things that I'm going to do, I'm like, wait until I rain on that parade. Because when it comes up that, hey, this person told me you could do this, be like, that person unfortunately is incorrect. I can't, or I'm not gonna, or I won't, and here's why.
As soon as any, that's so funny. So it's you when you mentioned the student centered. As soon as a student centered conversation even starts to remotely smell like student centered, but uh, system satisfied, I'm out. I'm out. And this is what this is what I listen for, right? In these conversations, because the other criteria of student centered, that's a singularity. That's a singularity. That's this kid. If this kid is the center of my current focus, and it's also important not to make the kid the center of a target. Make it a little bit softer. The center of the plan, the center of the emotional. If I'm using if I'm using emotions to center this child in my practice. So it becomes like lenses, right? Student center becomes different lenses that you can sort of see the kid. So if you're using housing security and putting the child at the center of your focus, what does that look like? And then the thing is that your capacity to sort of use different lenses to understand the kid then means you have to step through that lens and be there with the kid. You don't, I mean, you're going to return to system some point, like, foraging for other resources, but you're not keeping it student centered or child centered in order to keep the system happy. And the moment someone says, well, I'll use your example, you walking a kid to school as one of your child-centered strategies is a mirror to the school system that's made this kid leave. So the system, there's no way for the system to be satisfied in this because what the child actually needs is for someone to walk with them to school. So there's no there's no conversation there for me that starts and ends with, well, imagine. So this, I love these ones. Imagine if we actually had a program of teachers or caring adults that were available to walk kids to school. Imagine how ridiculous is that? And I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting idea, system. Maybe that is what we need. Maybe we do need a cohort of teachers that are available, or we figure out a way to staff a program. Hell, do it short term and show that you're listening. Right? Do it short term. I know the funding. Hey, system, I know the funding's not always going to be there. But what if your school was the school that was test driving that? The walk to school with the kid and their dog or whatever. You're not doing this illegally. You're not doing this breaking school rules. You're doing this because the child is at the center of your strategy. So, you know, if I were some thought leader in the system, I'd be like, damn, there is something there. we could keep feeding these to kids, but he's just like, what? It's, he I guess you could have a whole herd of kids, be the official kid walker. But again, the moment someone says that we can't do a thing because we don't have a thing, my only response is, how do we get that thing? And if the person in front of me says, I don't know, I'll go looking for the next person. In a similar way, it was also, I guess why I was a good person to put into Access back in the day. Because excuse me, back in the day, going into Access, working with students that were on suspension and expulsion, they were coming to me from multiple schools. So all very different cultures, different rule kits, tell you true, different rule kits, because I got to see, the length of a suspension for one kid versus another for a very similar infraction. And that's different rubrics based on different human judgments on what, the delivering of the punishment, right? That part's complicated, more complicated than a conversation right now. But me as the teacher in that space, I knew the resources that the co-op departments had in general at each of those schools. I knew the resources that the SAL departments had. I knew the resources that the student success departments had. I knew the resources that the spec ed departments had, all these sort of tenants, all these parts, categories of student success. And I would go back to the administrator. I said, I need this thing. And often, the conversation started. I remember way back in the day when I did summer school, and the summer school I was at, all the teachers at that summer school locked up all their LCD projectors. So there was no LCD projectors to actually do, there was no overhead projectors. This is that transition stage where LCD projectors were considered like gold, right? Don't mess with the cables. So the school staff, the day staff knew that summer school was coming in, so they locked up all their stuff. That administrator had to then go and contact first those teachers to come in and unlock all their stuff. And then they changed the locks, and they were cutting off locks. Very similarly, when I was talking to these administrators when I was in Access, and I would say, I know you have this thing, I need this thing. And often they would say, but that's the thing for them. And I would say, are they using it right now? And if the answer was no, or it was shifty, I would like, okay, I need to use it. While your student is here, I need to use that. That sort of like, you are well positioned to replicate that type of a conversation over and over and over again. And it's a hell of a lot of work. But I'll just say, if a kid needs to be walked to school to start the process of re-engagement, well, that hasn't been formalized yet. Hasn't been formalized yet on whatever checklist. But I figure that's what you're there to do, is to hold a mirror up to the system and say, you kind of thought re-engagement was, can we get them to do some literacy stuff? But maybe re-engagement has to extend to somebody walking this kid to school. And the moment anyone says, but we don't have resources for that, I guess at some point you could choose to walk away from the conversation and kind of go, well, this is what I found. You sent me out to kind of look and see, what is it that the kids need to come back? A couple of my kids, they're good if I help them with integers. Another kid, it was the art. They just felt they couldn't draw. Another kid, he didn't have a friend. I'm playing Switch with that kid once a week. And you know what? He's starting to sort of build trust in the adults in his world. But this other kid, they don't like the space between their front door and the front door of the school. But they'll tolerate it if somebody walks with them and their dog can come with them because they feel safe with their dog. These are phenomenally important moments that I'm going to go back to Rochelle saying system thinking. The system won't think like this. And I get it that there's humans. I get that there's humans in the system. But time and time again, it's the individuals that are able to have one foot in the system and one foot just out of the light, a little bit in the shadow, and saying, you know what, we need to increase some sort of perspective on this thing. Because, hey, system, or individuals that are in power or empowered within the system, if we don't go here, if we don't go here, there's bigger consequences than, you know, there's bigger consequences. You've used the word carceral. I've used the word carceral before as well. But even for some cases, it could even be life and death. It can be. Like there's a deeper wellness kind of factor here. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. You are placed exactly right. Your frustrations are exactly right. Your sort of wonderings are exactly right. And I would definitely, if I were the system, I'd hire you in a second. And I'd give you a team of individuals just to walk kids to school. Definitely.
I want to say there are, so when you, I appreciate I appreciate what you're saying about the different kids needing different things because that's exactly what's happening, right? Like yesterday I visited a kid who is now attending more regularly, but when is there is not all there. So when I checked in with that kid, it was, "Hey, how's it going? Let's walk and talk." The walk and talk led to grab your geography, grab your Chromebook, and I'm here for another 35 minutes. We can bang this out like Chidiac style, right? Like I can show you efficiencies. I can give you some hints and tips that this assignment's not going to take you half a day. Let's do this so you can walk back into the class and feel really good about not only checking in with me, but about the academic component that everybody wants, right? It's like everybody wants it all. And I'll tell you right now, the kiss of death are the people that make a referral. And when we ask them, what is it that you want? They respond with, they want full compliance, full attendance, full everything. They want they're the ones that go to Subway and say, "I want everything on that sub," which is usually me, right? Like they're like even guac. I'm like everything, every sauce you have, every spice. I want it all.
The difference being is you're probably prepared to pay extra if possible. It
But
right?
then the
And if
thing,
we make it about, sometimes not, if it says that it's all available to you. So, but I will say I also know you, and you'll pay. You're willing to, you recognize that extra stuff at some point. Fine, you get all the veggies, but to get that damn bacon, you're gonna
those
pay.
are those. So I'm no, no administrators are listening to this podcast. But if you're an administrator in my board and you want re-engagement support, and you put on a referral, you want it all. That goes right to my principal. I don't even entertain the referral. I just forward it to my principal and say, "Can we please talk about this?" And it ends with, "Do you want me to call the administrator and have a conversation?" I'm like, "That'd be awesome." Because my administrator knows that I'm struggling. In my role, I'm struggling to get many kids out of the house. And so when you tell me you want them out of the house after they've been in it for 3 years and you want it all, you're ignoring all kinds of layers. You're pretending there are no other layers, and that's just not the case with the kids I work with.
Will the system tolerate your efforts? Is a great
My
spot.
principal
Yeah,
tolerates my efforts,
yeah.
and I let her deal with the rest. And I've told you many times, there are all kinds of so the co-op teacher that works at Bosco, he said it best a couple of weeks ago when I saw him. He goes, "We work in the gray. We don't work in black and white at Bosco. It's all gray." So he's like, and that's we learn we don't even know what to do with black and white anymore because that's not our reality. I can see the different shades of gray now. And some gray, I've told you, I can see really bad gray and I say, "I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole unless my principal instructs me to do so." If my principal instructs me to do so, I will tell my principal, I will talk to my principal and say, "This is what I think, well, this is where I think I can start. I have no idea what comes after I start." And then my principal says, "Go or don't go." And then there's other times where I see like the gray's almost white, but it always hits the fan. I've not had, I look at some of these cases, I'm like, okay, this one looks on paper like it's relatively simple. And the kid ends up like going off the grid for weeks. Nobody can talk to the kid. right? It's like you just don't know. Um, so Rochelle responded to my question for more information, and she said, when people see the system wide picture that impacts the decisions being made instead of only what is best for their school situation. Now, I'm kind of sad that Rochelle said that because I'm pushing back. Seeing things from, okay, so I don't, when I'm up really high looking down, I can see what needs to shift to help kids. That what I'm seeing will benefit my work, but I struggle a lot when other people are up there in the airplane and then they're directing me based on what they see and how I can help them. And it's like, how do we win? Like, for perfect example, if I get pulled to start doing supply teaching because there are not enough teachers in the system. So someone's flying in the airplane, they're like, "Oh, Chidiak's over here doing this work. Let's just pull him and put him in with the supply teacher so that we can fill classrooms with teachers." The system loves that. Everybody loves that except me and my students. So I try to be sensitive when I'm up in the air because I know that for things to shift, it's very difficult. And I don't need a lot. You know what I need? I need a principal and a classroom teacher and a spec ed teacher for a certain student to show a little bit more grace. That's what I need. When I have that, then I can sell that to my students. And when I have that and my students don't buy, I'm the first one to hammer them. I'm the first one to say, listen, you don't see what's happening here. Your principal's on board. Your classroom teacher backs off when you need it. Your spec ed teacher's available to you all the time. And you are not participating in this experience. So now I can say with confidence, you're the problem. You told me when we started everybody else was the problem. So we worked on it. But guess what? Now everything's been filtered out. So now what's the conversation we're having is, do you want to be part of the solution? And if the answer is yes, it means that you're going to have to be brave. You're going to have to do some things differently, which I know some of them can't because, like I said, there's other layers involved, right? But I just do what I can with what I have at the time that I'm there. I do everything I can to even tell them, hey, dip your toe in the water. It's not, oh, that's when it's like, okay, let me look at my calendar. I've got these times. You pick one. I will be by your side that entire time. Dip your toe in the water. And we talk about what's the worst that could happen, what's the best that could happen. I walked a kid to school last week and I poloed you on the way home from the school. I walked the kid to school and the entire time the kid was talking to me about his anxiety. And the entire time I was saying, look at you. Look at you. Every step you take towards that school, you're not, look at you. You're still alive. You're still breathing. Everything's okay. Keep telling yourself that. You're still alive. This isn't going to kill you. So what is the worst that's going to happen? You're going to step into it, and we start talking about that. And I try to normalize. And then the kid's like, I can't wait to do this again tomorrow. I'm like, slow down. You haven't even gotten there yet. And you're talking, we're walking, you're talking about all your anxiety. Then you're talking about going tomorrow. I'm like, back off. You're stressing yourself out. Let's just deal with what's in front of us. The next day, the kid didn't go. And when I communicated, the kid's like, my anxiety's out of control. So what did I do? I communicated with him in a kind and compassionate way, and I sent an email to the social worker and the principal to inform them. I'm not here to help with anxiety. That's a social worker's job. When the social worker gets to it and how they get to it, that's not, I guess, my business. That's their business. But I'm informing them, hey, we're not going to hit any math. We're not going to do any learning skills if this kid's whacked out with anxiety. FYI. I'll still communicate with the kid. I'll still encourage the kid to go to the school. I'm going to do my things. but they're not going to work if we can't deal with some of the underlying reasons why this kid won't get up and go. And I can't walk them every day. I told them that too. I'm like, and I said to the kid, how many times have I booked a time with you to walk and you don't show or you cancel? I'm like, when you do that, I book other people in. So I'm like, I got a kid just like you that I can't be with you tomorrow. I got to be with that kid tomorrow because I promised them that was their chunk of time. And I have to do that. So when I say no to you, that means I said yes to somebody else. And if they cancel, then great. I'll hit you up and we'll see what we can do. That's my reality. Rochelle said, what I'm referring to is when schools want you to spend the whole day with their particular student, but you know that you need to budget your time to reach other students. Fair enough. Thank you, Rochelle, for clearing that up. And listen, if I can give a whole day, I will. But the problem becomes like, and my boss knows this, like if there's a certain situation where I need to be with a kid for like 3 days in a row, that you can imagine that's probably like a chaotic situation. But even then, I try not to do that because I'm like, they're going to be jonesing for me on that fourth day. They're going to be like, I can't do this without him. We didn't build any capacity. I was babysitting. And I say that in a respectful way, but a whole day with one kid means two or three other kids aren't going to see me that day. And for those two or three, the check-in can be enough to give them a little bit of energy to move on to the next day. There's no really easy answer. There's no really easy answer. There's just that's why I communicate on Snapchat and Instagram, because I can still get to kids to where they're at without actually being with them. I can still connect. Um,
You got
yeah.
me lit up just thinking about the success criteria. And I can remember the first year of when I was the alt ed for the first year. And um, all of a sudden, like there was no mentioning of any of the sort of like paperwork we had to, and between that we had to complete like the reports. But between the first year and the second year, first year and the second half of the second year, we got a request about credit conveyance. And that was my first glimpse at what what a successful alt ed program, how it was viewed top down through credit conveyance. There was no mention about relationships. There was no mention of wellness. There was no mention of increased attendance. There was no qualitative box about, does this kid generally seem more happy? Some of that cultural climate information, it was about credit conveyance, which is a very hard line. It's a very hard line. And I would even say rather like confusing, considering the two questions that I was constantly wrestling with is, how is my personalized alternative education department? How is it personalized? And how is it alternative? And I realized that I was asking that question within a box, right? I can't completely disregard the rules and the laws that govern education. I get that. But I guess I took the fact that I was going into this alt ed space, that meant there's a laboratory kind of element to it. And that it wasn't that the system was going to tell me what success looked like from the inside, but that I would have the time to mirror back the successes that I had and say, here's system, here's how we've moved the needle a little bit. That 1% kind of change, James Clear kind of action, right? Here's how we've just nudged that habit into, if I use system parlance, student success. If I just stay with the kid, they're not crying every day. If I just stay with the kid, they're eating breakfast now. If I just stick with the kid, they're not self-harming. If I just stick with the kid, they're not in conflict with this other kid in the school that made them afraid to come to school. So we've moved into, like, we've just nudged. And I can remember they asked about credit conveyance. And my credit conveyance was something like 61%. Actually, I think it was 63%. And that was 63%, but there were other kids that were in the room. So that was 63% conveyance of the total number of credits that were attempted, and nothing got cleared out. So if a kid was enrolled and didn't complete, like actually just disappeared, that was a like that was in there too. So that was basically taken as a zero. So that kid, they just looked at it. Did the kid make it to the end and get the credit? So they looked at the total number of kids that were referred. How many of them made it to the end? 63%. And I can remember it was funny because the individual that brought it to my attention in the to be in the department in the first place, one of the things they said is that credits aren't gold bars, right? They're not meant to be. We're not the gatekeepers on these to make sure, like hoarding the gold. And he said, be mindful of that. This was before, you know, the credit conveyance thing was asked to me. He said, be mindful of that as you sort of move through this space. So this individual had done Alta in the past. And I thought that was a really good way to sort of make sure that I'm not overvaluing or focusing too much on the actual credit. And I feel like in a lot of ways, I've spent the rest of my career making sure that the system saw that despite the fact that, and the language has caught up a little bit with wellness, mental wellness, overall cultural understanding, like we've caught up a little bit. So I'm talking like 10 years ago. But this thing still kind of pops up. There is no one other than you right now slowing down the system enough to really understand what some of these kids need. And I would say the frustrations that you may feel every once in a while, or the challenge, like even if you're asked to spend 3 days, 4 days in a row with one kid, is that part of what makes that a little bit frustrating is that the system has convinced you, even in a small way, that you need to be spending more time with more kids. Your heart wants to help more kids. But if there isn't a way for you to spend 3, 4 days with one kid, or if there isn't a way for someone that, if that's what we see the kid needs, how do we not work towards getting that for the kid? And I know it's way more complex, but hey, I don't have to, I'm not here to make the system's life easy. I'm not here to sort of make my SO's life easier. I don't even know if I'm here to make my principal's life easier. If I'm willing, as you said, to sort of be brave and actually get to know the students, employing all the tools that are expected of me to sort of make positive generative relationships with the kids, to be in some ways not only a teacher, a mentor, coach, but a parent in absentia. Like I can play a little bit of that role too. If I'm meant to care for these little humans, then I kind of think to myself, I just have to put forth the thing that I'm seeing and keep fighting to try and keep it in the mix. And also, for example, I'm at a meeting this past week trying to set up some programming for a kid. And I said to someone, is that actually for you to say no to? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're saying no, we can't do that thing, but is that actually you that's supposed to saying no? Or are we just making it easy for the system to forget this kid? We didn't really have a way out of that conversation. Sometimes I have a way kind of like take that pressure valve off. But I thought that was a good point to sort of say, like, how quick are we to say no because we can't muster the bravery to sort of keep pushing on that button, to hold it, to white knuckle just a little bit longer. This particular kid, I actually use that word. I'm like, I think we know there is no other program for this kid. So maybe this process of getting in trouble with other students, getting in trouble with administrators, like maybe this is their actual recovery process. And the people at the table didn't like that. I said, maybe it is. Maybe this is the um, the kid learning how to do school. Can we white knuckle long enough with this kid to slow them down enough to actually give them a few good, EDU vaxes to make them school tolerant? before they officially become intolerable to school, because that does happen pretty quick, right? But slowing them down so they get some of the good stuff actually means I was just talking with my CYW, sorry, not my CYW, the CYW that works with me in the program. We have just we have just started to use the common language of, in this particular case, we have to be the most clear, confident, consistent signpost for this kid. And not a signpost that's like the one-way street, just the clearest indicator as to where they are in their process of re-engaging with school. So a little bit of the re-engagement thing, like what you're doing, but for me, it's about my programming, right? And can we slow them down long enough to get them actually to take on, to soak up, soak in, sop up some of the stuff that we're trying to give to them, which is very different than what they've experienced in the past. They don't even have a basket to carry it in. They don't have a cup to fill up, or at least we haven't found the cup, or they don't want the stuff that we're giving them in their
So
cup.
perspective is very important, right? Very important. Like the kid that I met with yesterday who is going, I said to his teacher after when he was outside for recess, I said, listen, like he's coming. He's coming to school more often than not. And if he takes, 30-minute cat nap or whatever, like where's the harm there? Because what happens is if you push back on that, the kid just stops coming, and then everybody wishes that the kid just came. So I'm like, you got your wish. You wish for him to be here. He is here. You can keep wishing whatever's next, but I'm telling you that the fact that he's here is huge. It's huge. So like my check-ins with him, my working with him, my providing him with tidbits on how to proceed, you know, like if he buys into some of this, it's gonna help. Like right after Christmas, he had to do a presentation. He had to stand in front of the class and do a monologue. And before Christmas, I met with him and we created the monologue and I was giving him tips. I'm like, so when it's your turn to go up there, these are some of the things you can do. If you make them non-negotiable, it will appear as though you know what you're doing, even though inside you might not feel right about it. So he's like, yeah, yeah, okay, Mr. C, and we practiced or whatever. And then after in the new year, I said to the teacher, okay, when do you want me there? Because I told him I would be there for it. I would stand in the back, and as he looks up at the crowd, he's to look up at me because he knows I'm his cheerleader for that 40 minutes or whatever. So she tells me, can you come on this day, this time? I'm like, yeah, I get there and he's huffing and puffing, right? I'm like, bro, you're gonna be fine. You're going to be fine. You need to stop thinking about everything's going to go bad and start thinking about the things. I said, I'm a teacher. I'm a successful teacher. Look at me. And he laughs, right? And I'm like, just do the two or three things I told you to do. Stop fighting it. Just do it. You're going to be fine. You know the material. You have to stand in front of your peers. Okay. I know you got to stand in front of your peers. It's got to be done. You just got to do it. I'm right here. I'm here now. Let's go. Okay. Stands up, he starts, does a great job. At the end of it, people were providing comments or whatever. I raised my hand. He's like, yeah, Mr. C. I said, dude, I love this, this, and this. One thing I would suggest you work on next time is your volume. Because I'm at the back and I was kind of struggling here and there to hear you. I said, I know you're a big voice. I know you're a big voice. You were just maybe keeping it down so that some of your friends weren't disturbed by hearing you or whatever. And he just laughed at me and I'm like, gave him the thumbs up. I'm like, you did great. So then after we debrief, hey, these are things you're going to do in life. Okay. I gave you some suggestions that you can use anywhere in the world at any time when you speak. Remember that. Take that with you. Because I know you're not going to remember some of the content of your presentation, but hopefully you remember about how to talk to people and what you can do to make them feel good about what you're doing. So I go through that and then I tell the teacher again, hey, two thumbs up. Like he's getting some stuff done. Is he an A student? No. Is he going to be on the honor roll? No. Is he going to come every day? No. But he's here and he knows you care. For him, that's enough to get him here. For me, I will be sad if I find out in a couple of months that he's not coming anymore because something happened where he's like, just I'm just not. It's not worth me coming. It's easier for me to stay home. So, and like every situation, it's all relative. It's all relative. And I told a principal the other day, it's like I'm working with this big puzzle. So if we can look at the system again, I'm looking down from above and there's this huge puzzle in front of me on the ground, okay? And it's hilarious because at one school, they've got the pieces I need to help another school, another corner of the puzzle, but that's not how the puzzle works, right? So it's like I can see all the pieces and I just can't put them together because there are rules that tell me that I can't move that puzzle piece from this quadrant, but I need it in another quadrant to fit. It'll fit in the other quadrant, but I can't move it. The universe says you can't do it. So it's like I see all the pieces. The one at some of the schools where they're not open to anything I'm doing, if I could just pick up the kid and move the kid to a school where they have everything and want to welcome people and just drop them there, you know, theoretically it would work, but we know that that's not how it works. And then at other school, like I could pick up, so for one school, it's I'm moving the kid. For another kid, I'm moving the school, right? Like I see all the pieces, they're all in front of me. I just, the universe won't let it move.
It's almost like, again, I was before when I was in Access, before I would sort of ask the school for, I need you to send this resource over. Um, I'll do this in a different way. One of the examples that became pretty, I don't know, it wasn't contentious, but it was sort of like a holy crap, he's right kind of a moment. And the individuals that were saying, holy crap, he's right, were individuals that weren't paying attention to what I was doing. Like they just kind of suddenly noticed what I was doing. And then it was other individuals that had to admit that I was right. And those are two different individuals that were power holders that ultimately I got what I wanted, what I needed for the kid. So one of the individuals that was not referred in this case, that was sent to Access had quite a diverse suite of resources available to them in the main school that they were coming from. And then the kid did this thing that resulted in them being suspended. I forget, 3-4 days. So all the sort of like paperwork was fairly typical, as in the intake, the way it was set up, the way it was referred to me, everything was the yada yada yada. And then I got to look at this kid's support system. I said, okay, everything that this kid has at their home school, you need to send with them. And they were like, what the hell? That's a lot of stuff. I said, yep, yep. But if these are the tools that are expected for, like, because I had to make a line between the behavior that was being presented, the event that put them in my pipeline, and what the school was using to keep them involved in school. Because all that stuff that was being used has to come with the kid to the site. Now, at our site, it was myself and a CYW, but we didn't have all the diverse stuff that some kids need. We had bare bones. And it started the whole conversation between myself and the CYW, really, really digging into what elements of this experience are restorative. You would say re-engaging. I was saying restorative, but in a very similar kind of tone, because the idea that the re-engagement or the expulsion and suspension caused exacerbated trauma was not a space that I was cool with. I wanted the kid to sort of come out of this experience really with some positive feels. And I'm not talking like grandma, grandpa style, like we're loading them up with sugar, but loading them up with, and when we hand them back to the system, like, there you go. We recognize that the system that these kids or the schools that they're going back to may not have all the answers to kind of help them through the next stage. But I didn't want this to disappear. I didn't want this to be a blip where they felt like they completely disappeared from the system. And I didn't want our interactions with the kid to cause more harm. And that was a real eye opener where I asked for these things and there was a huge scramble. They actually had to delay the kids' enrollment by a day because of what I was asking for. And then the kid did their whatever 3 or 4 days and they went back to the school. But at that time, there wasn't any. The idea was they're suspended, expelled. We can kind of disappear this kid and then they'll be back at some point. So you're sort of talking about moving the school or moving the kid. I get that. I get that deeply. And I love how it sort of this also started. This was right in step. Me asking specifically for that stuff was partially instinctive, but it was also because I knew different schools had different resources. But I also knew I went to my principal first. I said, this is a fairly complex kid. If we're looking at this experience as being building success and building resiliency, building learning skills, if this actually is a space that has similar expectations to the rest of our school board, then these resources have to come with the kid. And they brought them. I got the resources. But it was very much like, fine, here you go. And I can't speak to whether or not this wasn't a protocol that was set up. There was no big bridge. I think at the end of that year, I transitioned to a different program. So I can't speak to where they're at right now. But I will say that was a really fascinating time. There was a fascinating moment there where I kind of was like, what the heck? Wait a second. So we could get this complex kid and it's just myself and the CYW, which were great. They're great resources. They're this kid's +1, +2, I guess. But the truth is, we're only meeting them for 3 days. So how much normalcy can we bring with this kid in order for them to actually get something done? Because the kid was coming too. And then, sometimes the kids say they don't want to go to that alternate space, and they do have that option, but this kid was coming.
Lots,
Lots,
lots.
man. I love it. I love that Rochelle jumped in too. It's good to hear from them.
Rochelle would be great in alt ed. I wonder if
Yeah,
she'd ever consider it. Yeah,
I
the
had
way
that. I
she
had that. Go. Sorry.
operates, just the way she operates, her care and compassion fits. Care and compassion fits, and trust me, it does. You get tested. You get
Yep.
tested.
Yep.
I pass the test sometimes and I fail the test sometimes, but it's those
Welcome to being
failures.
human.
Yeah, it's those failures that help me learn my triggers. And a couple of times this week, I've said to a couple of kids, "Don't." I've done the point. I'm like, "Do not push my buttons," and then they are they are wise enough to back down a little bit, and I'm like, "Just listen to me, okay?" And it's my favorite thing is after they're done, I'm like, "Was that so hard?" "No, all you did was talk to me." I'm like, "All I ever do is talk." "When was the last time I dragged you to school?" They're like, "You don't do that." I'm like, "Then why don't you talk to me?" Right? It's like, just talk to me, please. Like,
No, I like it. Checkmate. Checkmate.
when was the last
It's
time I dragged you to school? They're like, "You never do that." I'm like, "Then what's the problem?"
there's a student in my class in particular right now that loves to debate me. And sometimes they throw down some pretty inflammatory stuff. And
Mm.
you're moving in the right direction with your crew, your classroom crew. When just on Friday, one of them in the class said, "Yeah, buddy, you lost. You come back again tomorrow. Cluff's got you in a corner, and you're like you're throwing punches, and there's no one there. He's won. Walk away."
It's
And
like, it reminds me
the
that,
kid's like, no, 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 no. Well, I don't even have my hand up on there. Yeah, I'm not even holding them anymore. They're just like swinging in the dark. And
oh, I just imagined you with your hand on their head and
yeah,
they're just
yeah, yeah.
punching
They're
and
doing
not
the
hitting
empty
anything.
swings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just that when your classroom self manages that way, and some of the students that know you, this was a student that I've worked with for a year already because I have a 2 year grade 9 and 10 program. They're just like, just bud, stop. You've lost and you don't even know it.
That reminds me, bro, of when I was running classrooms and the kids would police each other, right?
Yeah,
They'd be like,
I like it.
"Oh, I love it's the best." I turn around, walk away, and smile because I'm
Yeah.
like, they're the ones who set the expectations. They're the ones who came together and agreed upon a certain way of operating, and now they're calling each other out. And it's
Mhm.
like, right on. I don't need to be the voice all the time. I need you. It was it makes me feel good about just they've bought in, whether they've
Yep.
bought into my stuff or they were empowered enough to share their stuff and everybody agreed to it, is like, hey, we're all living by this standard, this expectation, and this is what keeps it civil. So let's just keep moving and having fun. I
I
miss that.
always I always keep, any kid that does that, I always keep them after class for a minute and I say, "Thanks for caring." I said that showed that's exactly what I want from this class, and it's exactly what I can't ask for. All I can do is kind of hope that you kids are taking it in and that you're willing to kind of do the right thing when you notice it. And I said, "You did the right thing there. You did. You helped them de-escalate, and I appreciated that you showed care for me." And because I feel like that's the cringe factor of care that's good to pierce through, to tell the kid exactly that you appreciate that they showed some consideration for you. And even if the kid kind of goes, whatever, um, I've been the right signpost in in that case.
What do we got today? Hearts and crowns?
Hearts and crowns and
Oh, okay.
angel wings and
Got it. Got it.
happy Valentine's Day, kids.
Same to you, Cluff. Happy
Thanks,
Valentine's
man.
Day.
Happy Valentine to Rochelle.
Yes, thank you, Rochelle, for listening in. For anybody else who's listening in, thanks for checking us out. Enjoy
Hmm.
your enjoy your week. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. Enjoy your
Hmm.
weekend first, though.
Yes, one day at
And
a time.
hey, Carlos, if you're still listening, good morning. Because I know Carlos used to listen in the mornings, but I don't know. I haven't spoken to Carlos in a while. So what's up, Carlos?
What's
Anyway,
up? Yep.
this was season 6, episode 21, number 239 of the Decoded Podcast. We'll catch you later.
Peace, man.
Peace.